Hello friends, if you are new here, welcome. If you are not, welcome back. My name is Ellen and I'm a burnout and stress management coach. And on this channel we talk about all sorts of different things. We talk about Notion all the time. We talk about stress management, productivity, self-care. Today though, what I'm really wanting to talk about is, as a burnout coach, do I ever still burn out? Like, am I burned out now? Is it possible to fully recover from burnout? This channel is relatively new, and some of you might not know my story. I have talked about my kind of burnout story on my podcast, which I'll actually go ahead and link that below, but I'll give you like a little condensed version right now. So I actually have a background in science. I had been doing science for about 10 years by the time I kind of had my first bout of burnout. I actually was in graduate school. I was pursuing my PhD in something very nerdy in science. We'll just say that. I was doing research, and during that time, I burned out really, really hard, and I burned out in just about every single way you can. I was physically absolutely exhausted. I was totally overwhelmed, but probably at the core of it for me, it was about being emotionally burned out. I had started to realize that the path that I was on and the things that I was pursuing weren't actually fulfilling, didn't actually make me happy, didn't validate me and, pour back into me in the way that I always thought they would. And I kind of came to the realization that my entire professional life and academic life up until that point had been purely about other people and purely about getting validation from other people. And I hit this sort of wall where everything that I was doing, the long hours, the being in lab all the time, just wasn't worth it anymore. So this went on for about 2 years, but the long and short of it is that after, frankly, I always call it my avalanche of low points, I finally decided to leave graduate school. I finally decided to pursue something that I was really passionate about, because during this time and kind of in my own process of trying to get my physical health back, get my energy levels back, find some sense of fulfillment again, figure out who I was and what I actually wanted, I found coaching, which threw a massive monkey wrench into my life and my plan for myself. I had never anticipated doing this work, and frankly, the first time I thought about it, I kind of laughed to myself because, is that a real thing? Do people actually do that? What does a coach even do? Can I make a living doing that? It felt like a joke of a career to me, especially as somebody who'd made a lot of decisions from the perspective of wanting to impress people. But here I was after, 2 years of ups and downs and fighting it, finally realizing what I actually want to do is I want to be a coach. So when I left graduate school, I dropped out of my PhD in fall 2016. I left science completely in fall 2017. I did it with the intention of becoming a coach. Burnout came later, though. It's ironic, though, because at the time, I actually have an old YouTube video that I don't actually even know if it's private, public. I'll try to find it if I can, where I describe myself as a burned out doctoral student. And I used that phrase long before I was considering coaching. I described myself as a burned out doctoral student. And the irony is that the notion of being a burnout coach didn't come until later. I was a health coach. I was a personal growth coach, whatever the hell that means. I was a life coach, whatever the hell that means. I was a productivity coach. I was a clarity coach. I did all sorts of different types of coaching before I had this epiphany of the fact that, holy crap, my entire experience and my entire coaching all kind of was under the realm of burnout. That's how I got here. So that's like my condensed story. But back when I was in graduate school, the type of burnout I was experiencing was emotional burnout. At its core, emotional burnout is when you get off track with the things that fulfill you. It's the fulfillment side of burnout. And when you are experiencing emotional burnout, it's that stuckness. It's that lack of motivation, especially for high achievers that are used to being very motivated and very self-accountable and self-sufficient. It's when your emotions are all over the place. It's when you just don't feel like yourself. That's really emotional burnout. And when I was in graduate school, I actually have old blog posts that said I'm the worst version of myself right now. And I was snapping at people in a way I never had. So that's a type of burnout that I'm happy to say, to the extent that I felt it, has never come back. That is a type of burnout that I have overcome, definitely. But last year, actually, when I was doing a podcast interview, I got interviewed by Stephanie of Nosy AF podcast. And she asked me one of the most honest interview questions I have ever been asked. I've been doing burnout coaching. At that time, it had been almost 3 years. Now it's been almost 4 years, about 3.5 years actually, of doing burnout coaching. And she asked me point blank, am I burned out? And it was one of those times where it was one of the most honest questions I've ever been asked, and I really wanted to give her an honest answer. And at that time, in all honesty, I was burned out when she asked that question. I was emotionally burned out in a different way at that time. You know, it was still kind of had the same roots. Like at the time when I was in graduate school, my emotional burnout came from a lot of things having to do with my career. But last year when she asked me this question, I was emotionally burned out not because I was unfulfilled, but because I was lonely. I didn't have a lot of social connections in my life, at least that I was actively reaching out to. You know, that emotional burnout comes from a disconnect between our lives and our values. Really, in a nutshell, that's what it is. It's a disconnect between our lives and our values. And when I'm not connecting enough with people socially, it conflicts with my value of belonging. You know, back in graduate school, I was conflicting with my value of fulfillment. I wasn't doing things that were fulfilling me, you know, in all of my time, and it was emotionally burning me out. This time, it was about not finding places where I felt like I belonged. And so that value wasn't getting fulfilled. My belonging value is basically about, you know, I define it, I do what's called a value statement. I actually have a whole process for how to determine what your core values are, especially from a burnout and stress management perspective inside of my burnout membership, which I'll link down in the description below. But my belonging value is something along the lines of to be able to be myself openly, vulnerably, and without fear when I'm with people. I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but that's what I believe belonging is. It's just to be open and vulnerable and to feel like I have the level of connection and, you know, psychological safety with people so I can just be myself vulnerably and without fear. That's really what it is about for me. And at that time, I think there was a little bit of not feeling like I could, but also a not seeking out those times to really belong. I wasn't connecting with people. And that was a huge aha for me in that interview, that I needed to do that more. Unfortunately, I have. You know, burnout recovery is all about correcting behaviors. Our burnout comes from your habits, your behaviors, your mindsets that are driving you toward burnout. That's where it comes from. It's driving you toward chronic stress. That's basically what burnout is in a nutshell. And I wasn't doing that at the time. And fortunately, I have rectified that. Do I hang out with people as much as I want to now? No, definitely still not, but it's better. And when I start to feel that like I was feeling it before, I fix it before it gets so bad that I get into that place like I was last year. Am I burned out now, though? I wouldn't necessarily say I am. Now, the thing to know about burnout is that there are different types of burnout. I've been talking a lot about the fact that the types of burnout I've experienced that have dragged me down in the past have been emotional burnout. But there have been times in the past where I was experiencing boredom burnout. Boredom burnout, you can literally burn out when you don't feel like you're being challenged by the work that you're doing. And when I was in graduate school, I was experiencing that too. Graduate school is like a poo-poo platter burnout for me. But boredom burnout is not something I've experienced in a very, very long time. I have enough things going on and enough things that are engaging me that boredom burnout's really not an issue. I have definitely had times when I've experienced in the past overwhelm burnout. That is kind of that productivity side of burnout. You have an overwhelming to-do list, and ultimately what it comes down to is your systems can't manage it. So a lot of that burden when your systems can't manage it gets put on your brain, and your brain gets overwhelmed, you stress out, and that leads to overwhelm burnout. I have been in that as well. There was a period of time in early 2021 when I was starting to get, actually not early 2021, about mid 2021 to late 2021, I was starting to get speaking engagements in my business. And, you know, that with everything else I had going on in my business and in my day job, there was a period of time where it was a lot of speaking, a lot of, you know, coaching work, and I was a manager in my day job, and my systems were not built to accommodate that much. I had to really rejig things in my business to be able to accommodate everything I was carrying on and figuring out what was sustainable for me. Every time there's a shift in your life circumstances, you might start to realize, oh my God, my systems don't accommodate this. I need to make changes. And again, just like before, once you make those changes, usually you're able to start accommodating things. Usually, as soon as you know what your capacity actually is, you're able to take on, just that and be able to, sustain things just fine. Burnout's really about sustainability. So I'd gotten to the point where I have good systems in place. So the Overwhelm burnout's managed. I'm doing a lot of things. So the Boredom burnout's managed. And I'm constantly doing things to fulfill myself, to try to connect with people. I'm constantly doing things to help manage that emotional component of my burnout. The last one that I still occasionally struggle with, and I think maybe you could say that I have a mild amount of physical burnout right now, is because I've been pushing myself really hard. One of the hardest parts of doing this work is the fact that my business is not full-time. I'm working 2 jobs, essentially. And it's not easy in the slightest to do, and I've been doing it for a really, really long time. I work more than you quote-unquote should. If you knew how much I work, I probably work like 60 or 70 hours a week, which is not something I want to do, but fortunately for me, I work enough, or I work in a sense that I'm actually getting a lot of fulfillment and diversity and all sorts of things from the work that I'm doing because it's different. I spend, 30, 35 hours a week of my life doing my day job work, and I spend about 20, 30 hours a week doing my business work, sometimes more than that. So it's actually probably more like 50, 60 hours a week then. Yeah, some ballpark 60 hours a week. We'll just say that. I work more than I want to, and I work more than I probably should, and I'm not, I'll admit it, not always the best at taking time off and relaxing and taking care of myself, as I'm sure you can relate to. So when I start to feel, some of the signs that I know with physical burnout, I start to feel headaches. I start to feel, especially, constant headaches. I start to feel really, really tired, that level of exhaustion. That is a red flag for me that I need to get back to those habits and activities and behaviors that I know help me manage burnout. I heard another burnout coach say at one point in time that she has to intentionally get herself back into a mode of overwhelm so she understands what her clients feel. I am not that burnout coach. I help people that I call high achievers because high achievers have a tendency to push themselves and push themselves and push themselves and push themselves beyond capacity because they love the validation, the thrill, the insert word here for how that productivity and that accomplishment makes them feel. And I am my ideal client through and through. That person that I help that person because I am them. I totally understand the inclination to not want to turn off because I experienced that. You should see my goals list for this year. It is insane. I should not have watched. It was a great video, actually. I watched a video by Anna Lanks on YouTube. She's one of my favorite YouTubers. I love following her. She had a video about how she has over 100 goals this year. I got inspired. We'll just say that. I put a lot on myself. Totally understand that, but that's also why I often say, especially for high achievers, burnout happens, but staying burned out is a choice. Because what we have to realize, and what I've come to realize over the years, I can absolutely recover from burnout, as can you. Burnout is something you can recover from, but burnout will come back if you're not engaging in habits and behaviors and, things that help manage it, things that help minimize it. Burnout is a spectrum. You could have very, very mild amounts of burnout and very severe amounts of burnout. And when it gets to that severe point, like it did for me in grad school, that is when we basically break down. We have to hit a reset button and do shit different in our lives. Or else it's just going to continue to now impact our physical health beyond just our mental health. But if we can keep it at the mild end, or if we can keep it non-existent at all, that's the goal. And we do that through understanding our triggers, understanding the habits and behaviors and mindsets that are leading us to burnout in the first place, and managing them and mitigating them and working as best we can to shift them and replace them with habits and behaviors that are better. Habits, behaviors, and mindsets that prevent burnout, that stress-proof our lives, that create anti-burnout lifestyles. That's the kicker. So, am I burned out right now? Mildly, maybe. You could maybe say I have a little bit of physical burnout right now, but is it impacting my life in a negative way? No. Has it in the past? Absolutely. Have I recovered from that? Absolutely. But life is dynamic. Life changes, and new obstacles and hurdles will come up in your life that you've got to figure out a way to navigate around. It's the same with burnout, just like it is with everything else. So I hope that gives you a little window into, as a burnout coach, do I still burn out? What's my story and my history with that? Am I still struggling with it? Yes, absolutely. And honestly, it'll probably be something that I keep struggling with for the rest of my life, because burnout requires consistency. And as soon as you fall off track, as soon as you stop doing the things that you know help you manage your stress and your burnout, that's when it comes back again. So that's all I've got to say about that. If you liked this video, go ahead and like and subscribe down below. Drop any comments if any of this resonated with you. If something that I said really is something that you experience as well, I would love to hear it. But with that, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.